Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening. Roxanne was the only one in the empty office. She turned on her laptop, intending to research more about congenital diseases among children. However, she could not absorb anything she read. Her initial plan for coming back to the research institute was to work, as she hoped to use it to forget about Lucian's words earlier. Little did she expect everyone to be so supportive about the medical consultation. Sitting alone in the office, she could not decipher her mixed feelings. She could not retain much information even after staring at the screen for a long time. Right as she reached the peak of her frustration, her phone suddenly rang. Roxanne picked up her phone and froze when she saw who the caller was. Although she was hesitant, she still decided to answer the call. "Roxanne, how is your preparation coming along?" It was Larry on the other end of the line. Suppressing her emotions, Roxanne calmly replied, "I'm still trying to understand the Damaris family's research approach." "How about you?" Larry chuckled. "Me too. However, I will be going there with the intention to learn, so I did not prepare much." After they exchanged some of their findings, Larry suggested, "The medical consultation will be happening this weekend and it will be out of town. I could swing by to pick you up and head to the medical consultation together. What do you think?" Previously, Roxanne had already agreed to go there with him. Despite so, when Larry brought it up again, Lucian's furious expression appeared in her mind's eye. A short moment of silence passed. Massaging her temples, Roxanne answered in an apologetic tone, "Larry, I think I will head there on my own." Instantly, Larry frowned when he heard her reply. "Oh, what's wrong? I thought we agreed to go to the medical consultation together. I went to old Mr. Queen to get a recommendation letter from him earlier. By chance, I found out that the Morrison and Damaris families are well acquainted. Old Mr. Queen thinks I could get to know the Damaris family better if I headed there with you. However, I would rather rely on my own abilities instead." It was not an excuse she thought of on the spot. In fact, that had crossed her mind while she was in the Queen residence. When Jonathan brought up the relationship between Larry and the Damaris family, she felt comforted. At the same time, she realized it was not how she wanted things to pan out. It was true that she could use Larry's relationship with the Damaris family to her advantage. That way, when the Damaris family decided on who to collaborate with in the future, she would gain priority. However, she worried the Damaris family would give her special treatment during the medical consultation. As a result, she might not be able to showcase her full strengths to them. Ultimately, she hoped to gain the Damaris family's favor through her own capabilities. After listening to her reply, Larry remained quiet for a while. Then he cheekily stated, "All right. You can have your way. However, do not pretend we are strangers during the medical consultation, okay?" He was well aware of Roxanne's character and knew she never liked to rely on others. At the same time, he also knew how capable she was and believed she could impress the Damaris family without his help. Therefore, he was not surprised when Roxanne rejected his offer. Roxanne chuckled. "Okay. If you need anything during the medical consultation, feel free to look for me. Although I might not be as skilled as you in traditional medicine, I could still give you some ideas," Larry continued. "Sure," Roxanne agreed with a smile. Then they continued to exchange a few more words before they ended the call. Finally, Roxanne felt more composed to continue her preparation. Before she got off work, she had thoroughly analyzed all her research. The night before the medical consultation, Roxanne inevitably felt nervous. After dinner, she headed to her study early and planned to go through all the information she had gathered over the past few days. Only a few minutes had passed when she heard a knock on her door. Roxanne looked up from her laptop and called out, "Come in." As soon as she spoke, Archie and Benny pushed open the door and walked in with a smile. Archie had a cup of coffee while Benny carried a plate with a slice of cake. Carefully, the two children placed the things down on the table. "Thank you, darlings," Roxanne cooed as she lovingly ruffled their hair. Archie and Benny grinned before curiously peeking at Roxanne's screen. When they were abroad, the boys spent much of their childhood in the research institute. Having been in that environment, they had acquired some basic knowledge, so they had a rough idea of what was easy or difficult. After reading some of the information on Roxanne's laptop, the children quietly looked away. Despite their knowledge, Roxanne's preparation work was still too advanced for them. "All the best, Mommy," Benny cheered. Roxanne could not help but smile at the encouragement. "Thank you, darling. I will try my best." Beside her, Archie puffed up his chest to act like an adult. He nagged, "Mommy, do not stay up too late. Since the medical consultation is an important event, you should have a good rest to perform your best tomorrow." "Yes, I will," Roxanne readily agreed. "Mommy, you are already very skilled. Even if you do not prepare anything, I'm sure you will shine the brightest tomorrow," Benny quickly added to gain some brownie points. Their words only made Roxanne amused. She planted a kiss on their foreheads and replied, "Thank you for supporting me. I will do my best tomorrow. Meanwhile, both of you should go to bed. After I finish reading this, I will head to bed too." The children knew they would only distract Roxanne from her work if they stayed longer. Therefore, they obediently heeded her words and left the study. Soon, the room was silent again. Glancing at the coffee and cake, Roxanne felt a surge of warmth enveloping her. She spent some time reading the documents before realizing it was getting late. Since she felt prepared, she got up and decided to get some rest. When she stepped out of the study, she noticed two heads shrinking back from the open bedroom door. At the sight of that, Roxanne could not hold back her laughter. She headed to their bedroom and questioned, "Why aren't both of you sleeping?" Immediately, the two children embraced her and coyly whined, "We wanted to keep an eye on you. If you stayed up late, it would not be good for you. Therefore, we were just about to ask you to have an early night." Their thoughtfulness melted Roxanne's heart, and she caressed the boys' heads. After she tucked them into bed, she headed back to her bedroom. She felt excited yet nervous about the medical consultation the next day. Luckily, she managed to calm herself and fall asleep quickly. The next day, Roxanne woke up on time. As soon as she opened the door, she saw two small figures standing outside her room. The two boys wore white shirts and black slacks with suspenders. With their hair slicked back, they looked like little princes. Tilting their head up, they greeted Roxanne energetically, "Good morning, Mommy." Taking in her children's appearance, Roxanne felt her mood lifting, and the pressure she had felt before seemed to have disappeared. She took the two children down for breakfast, and they lovingly filled her plate with food. Before she left, they did not forget to cheer her on. Roxanne thought it was funny but heartwarming at the same time. After bidding her children goodbye, Roxanne drove to the location where the medical consultation would take place. The event was scheduled to start at 10 in the morning. Afraid of being late, Roxanne left the house at 8. Since her return to Horrington, she had spent most of her time in the city. Hence, she was rather unfamiliar with the roads on the outskirts. Although she turned on her navigator, she still took several detours. When she finally reached the orphanage, more than a few cars were already parked outside. "Looks like I arrived later than expected." Slightly exasperated, Roxanne furrowed her brows. She grabbed her recommendation letter before quickly getting out of her car and heading to the entrance. There was a queue outside consisting of doctors from different parts of the country with letters of recommendation, and almost all of them were middle-aged men. When it was Roxanne's turn, the man in charge took a glimpse of her and politely reminded her, "Miss, are you at the wrong place? The Damaris family has organized a medical consultation here. Are you sure you are? Hearing that, Roxanne was taken aback. She then interrupted him. I know. I'm here to take part in it. The man suspiciously stared at her and thought it did not seem right. Previously, the people who entered were all middle-aged men. Most of them seemed to have the same refined and mellow personality. Roxanne was neither middle-aged nor a male. As such, she was different from the rest. Compared to the rest, she stood out like a sore thumb. To the man in charge of the registration, she seemed more like an actress coming for a shoot than a doctor seeking to participate in a free medical consultation for children. The other doctors lining up also looked at Roxanne in confusion, thinking she was there to cause trouble. At that moment, Roxanne took the recommendation letter from Alfred out of her bag. She passed it to the man and stated, "Here is my recommendation letter. Please have a look at it." The man skeptically took her letter and opened it. He glanced through it before looking at Roxanne in surprise. After a moment, he snapped back to his senses, moved aside, and bowed to Roxanne. "Dr. Jarvis, I apologize for my rudeness. I thought you were an actress coming here to film." Roxanne simply pursed her lips and smiled without saying anything. Although there was a misunderstanding, she had to admit people from the Damaris family were well-mannered. Even though he thought she had come to the wrong place, he did not treat her with disrespect. As such, Roxanne did not take it to heart. "Please come in. There will be someone inside who will lead you to Mr. Damaris." The man gestured for her to enter. Roxanne politely thanked him and took her recommendation letter with her inside. The Damaris family had transformed the orphanage. They had built cubicles in the courtyard and people were already waiting in them, appearing to have been sent over by the Damaris family to aid the doctors. Meanwhile, children were leaning against the windows, looking out curiously at the courtyard. Roxanne turned to those children and instantly felt her heart melt for them. Naturally, she gave them a warm smile. It was the first time those children had seen someone as pretty as Roxanne. Seeing her beautiful smile, the children could not help but blush. At the same time, one of the workers there came to greet Roxanne. Like the man at the door, the next employee was surprised to see Roxanne. Subconsciously, he looked behind her to see if there was a camera somewhere. Roxanne politely smiled and automatically passed him her recommendation letter. "Hello. Old Mr. Queen recommended I join the medical consultation. Earlier, your colleague told me someone would bring me to Mr. Damaris. Please lead the way." When the employee heard that, he suspiciously took her letter. After confirming her identity, he turned to bring her further into the building. Along the way, Roxanne expected to see many doctors there. After all, many had queued up outside earlier. On the contrary, she did not meet many people, which seemed strange. When they arrived in front of the director's office, Larry coincidentally came out from it. Upon spotting Roxanne, he chuckled and waved to her. "Did you just arrive?" Roxanne nodded. She wanted to share what had happened earlier. However, there was no time to tell him about it. "Mr. Damaris is waiting inside, and you should head in soon. This year, not many prestigious families recommended others here. It might only be us two," Larry stated. Roxanne was slightly confused by his words. She did not understand how that made a difference. Before she could ask more, the employee knocked on the office door and invited her in. Quickly, Roxanne had to calm herself and prepare to head inside. The moment she entered the door, she spotted a skinny young man. Perhaps because of how thin he was, his features were more prominent. "Mr. Damaris, this is Dr. Jarvis. The Queen family recommended her," the employee introduced. The man slowly looked up at Roxanne. When she met his gaze, Roxanne respectfully introduced herself. "Hello, the Queen family recommended me to participate in this medical consultation. My name is Roxanne Jarvis. The man eyed her. Over the last few years, the Damaris family would typically accept doctors recommended by prestigious families to participate in medical consultations organized by them. It was no exception this year. To show his respect, he would meet each of them in person. The doctors endorsed by prestigious families were usually members of those families. Most of them had already made a name for themselves in the traditional medicine scene as well. However, the woman before him, recommended by the Queen family, was different. She was not from the Queen family, and Jack had never even heard of her name. He only knew she had treated Alfred. Jack had asked Larry about her earlier and understood that she was Harvey's student. Despite having some knowledge about her, he did not expect Roxanne to be a young and beautiful woman. As he scrutinized her, Roxanne could not help but feel nervous. Even so, she stood there with confidence. After some time, the man looked away and curled his lips into a smile. He stretched out his hand and welcomed her. I have heard much about you. My name is Jack Damaris, and I'm the person in charge of the medical consultation this time. Roxanne reached out to shake hands with him. Somehow Jack seemed cold when he did not speak. However, once he opened his mouth, he seemed like a warm person. Roxanne could not help but think about the man who welcomed her at the door and attributed it to the Damaris family's good upbringing. As for Jack, she had heard of him before. Over the past few days, Roxanne had read up on the Damaris family while studying for the medical consultation. She knew that Jack was Hector's grandson and also the best doctor from the Damaris family's youngest generation. As the Damaris family had been keeping a low profile in recent years, Jack rarely showed up in front of the public, and it made him seem mysterious. When she was going through that information, Roxanne could not help but wonder what kind of a person he was. Now she could finally put a face to the person she had read about. I heard you used traditional medicine to treat old Mr. Queen's condition, Jack said in a low voice. Nodding, Roxanne explained, according to my judgment, using traditional medicine was more suitable in treating old Mr. Queen's condition. It would also work faster. Then she looked up to see Jack's reaction. It seemed like he wanted her to continue. Therefore, Roxanne recounted her journey in treating Alfred's illness. Jack raised his brows while hearing her speak. He was surprised by how composed the young lady was when she talked about Alfred's condition. In addition, he had to admit that she made sense. When Alfred was severely ill, the Damaris family sent quite a few people to help him get back in shape. However, as he was quite weak, they did not dare to use overly drastic measures. Once Alfred told her of his condition, Roxanne inserted each needle in his critical points before managing to save him. After hearing Roxanne's analysis, Jack could not help but ask, considering old Mr. Queen's health back then, what reason did you have to decide on such an acupuncture method? Roxanne was stunned for a while. Back then she had taken a huge risk. If she explained it to Jack like that, he might not believe her. After all, her method was too risky. Upon that thought, Roxanne hesitated for a moment before explaining, I chanced upon it in a medical book. Coincidentally, old Mr. Queen's condition matched what was described there, so I wanted to give it a try. Jack nodded in understanding, not suspecting her words at all. It was true that Harvey had a few precious books. Since Roxanne was his disciple, it was not strange that she would have read those books. Furthermore, Roxanne was still very young. Jack did not believe that her medical skills would be extremely advanced. Luckily you thought of that idea. Otherwise he wouldn't have recovered so quickly, said Jack politely with a smile. Roxanne responded with a humble smile. They chatted for a while. Jack's polite attitude caused Roxanne to let her guard down slowly. Initially she assumed that Jack would be arrogant because he was from the Damaris family. To her surprise, the Damaris family had remarkable upbringing methods, and he was very humble. Seems like our cooperation will be very smooth in the future. A staff knocked on the door and entered. Mr. Damaris, the hospital is already prepared. The kids are waiting. When Jack heard that, a serious expression crossed his face. It's almost time. Dr. Jarvis, let's change our clothes and prepare. Roxanne nodded before following the staff to change her clothes. When she walked out of the changing room, she bumped into Larry again. Although she had already mentally prepared herself, she could not help but feel nervous now that the medical consultation was about to start. When she saw a familiar face, her anxiety dissipated slightly. Smiling, she greeted him, Larry. Larry returned her smile and patted her shoulder. Don't be nervous. Just treat it as a normal consultation with a kid. With your skills, there should be no problems. Roxanne smiled. As they spoke, Jack also walked over after changing his clothes. Hey, are you ready? Let's go. As they were about to start work, Jack looked very serious. His stern aura returned to him. Roxanne was stunned for a while before shooting a look at Larry instinctively. Larry smiled. He knows that we are acquaintances. In fact, he even asked me about you earlier. I'm sorry that your efforts went to waste. By saying that, he was referring to how Roxanne chose to come alone in order to avoid any suspicions. Since Jack already knew that she was acquainted with Larry, Roxanne felt calmer. She nodded at Larry before walking out together with the other man. Only a few minutes had passed, but there was now a lot more equipment in the courtyard compared to when she first arrived. Roxanne scanned the place. Although the Damaris family was a prestigious family in the traditional medicine field, there were quite a few pieces of modern medical equipment placed in the courtyard. This was to make it easier to treat the children. The doctors who were queuing up earlier had already entered their own cubicles. Smiling amiably, they looked at the children waiting to enter. Everything looked very formal. Roxanne walked into her cubicle briskly. There was already another doctor waiting there. When he saw that she was just a young woman, he thought that she was merely a useless person whom the family had recommended. Hence he ignored her. Larry followed her in. There were 2 to 3 doctors in each cubicle, as well as someone from the Damaris family. Their cubicle was the most well-equipped out of all the cubicles. There were 2 doctors recommended by the prestigious family and a famous traditional medicine doctor. Even Jack was accompanying them personally. When Larry entered, Daniel Hop's expression changed. Smiling, he welcomed Larry. Mr. Morrison, it's been a long time. Larry nodded calmly. A long time no see, Dr. Hop. Daniel grinned at him in a flattering manner. He kept following behind Larry and showering him with care. However, he ignored Roxanne completely. Roxanne did not mind his coldness. Instead, she focused on checking all the equipment. Then she nodded at Jack, who was standing at the entrance, signaling that she was ready. All the equipment they were using today had been customized by the Damaris family. Hence, the family members waiting in the cubicles were meant to introduce the equipment to the doctors. Jack was supposed to guide Roxanne and Larry personally. Jack had just returned after checking up on the others. When he entered to explain the equipment to Roxanne, he realized that she had already finished all the checks skillfully, as if she had used the equipment multiple times before. Evidently, Roxanne had prepared well before coming. A flash of surprise appeared in Jack's eyes as he wondered how Roxanne had discovered these secrets. However, he gave it further thought and remembered that Roxanne was not only recommended by Alfred but was also Harvey's student. It was not surprising that she knew the Damaris family's matters. Even so, it was rare that someone would spend so much effort for this medical consultation. Do you know how to use all these? Intrigued by Roxanne's performance, Jack walked over. When Jack entered, Daniel wanted to greet him as well. However, Jack merely nodded at him politely before directing his gaze to Roxanne. Roxanne nodded humbly. I read up on them before coming. However, since it's my first time using them, I don't know if I might have made any mistakes. Please explain them to me again, Dr. Damaris. Jack gazed at her broodingly before explaining. He spoke slowly so she would understand. Roxanne listened attentively at the side and asked some meticulous questions occasionally. She had been amazed when she read about the equipment the Damaris family had invented. After listening to Jack introduce them personally, she felt a greater urge to familiarize herself with them. Looking at how curious she was, Jack maintained his patience and answered all of her questions. Larry was listening attentively too. However, Daniel was very distracted. When he saw how nicely Jack was treating Roxanne, his expression changed gradually. His initial indifference morphed into indignance. That woman obviously doesn't know anything. How dare she keep asking Mr. Damaris these questions? It's even more frustrating how patient he is with her. The only possibility Daniel could think of was that Roxanne had a powerful background. Otherwise, Jack would not have treated her so differently. Even though he had so much experience, Jack did not even spare him another glance. On the other hand, Roxanne was so engrossed in Jack's explanation that she did not even notice Daniel staring at her. After Jack was finally done explaining, the cubicle became quiet again. Daniel immediately approached Jack and asked, Mr. Damaris, when will the medical consultation start? Jack glanced at the time and replied, soon. Please wait for a moment. We are preparing outside. Daniel nodded. Shooting Roxanne a weird look, he asked Jack, we've got a serious responsibility here. Why don't we bring a few more doctors from another cubicle over? When Roxanne and the rest heard him, they glanced at him in confusion, not knowing why he would suggest that. Jack asked directly, why? Do you think that you will be too busy, Dr. Hop? Daniel shook his hands. If there are 4 doctors here, we definitely have enough people. But now, I'm afraid that the checkups for the kids will not be meticulous enough and some mistakes might happen. As Daniel spoke, he deliberately glanced at Roxanne. In other words, he was suggesting that she was not professional enough. Only then did Roxanne realize that Daniel was not satisfied with her. She could not help but feel confused. I don't even know him, yet he's being so hostile toward me. She normally did not mind people doubting her medical skills. However, on this special occasion, she felt uncomfortable. Jack followed the direction of Daniel's gaze and glanced at Roxanne. However, he quickly averted his gaze and said coldly, Dr. Hop, are you saying that someone's skills here aren't up to par? Although Daniel merely smiled without saying anything, he was implicitly affirming what Jack said. At that, Jack raised his eyebrows and looked at Roxanne. While he also doubted Roxanne's medical skills, he believed that Alfred and Harvey would not recommend an incapable traditional medicine doctor to him. Still, he would not defend her based on this teeny bit of trust alone. Observing this ridiculous scene from the side, Larry frowned. Dr. Hop, we are all doctors. At this critical juncture, please don't affect other people's moods. It'll soon become clear whose skills aren't up to par. Daniel did not expect Larry to speak up on behalf of Roxanne. A flash of surprise appeared in his eyes as he stared at the 3 of them suspiciously. It was obvious what he was thinking. A grim look flashed across the 3 people's faces simultaneously. Jack frowned. However, out of concern for the Damaris family's reputation, he did not reveal any fury. Unable to stand it, Roxanne strode toward Daniel and said coldly, Dr. Hop, we don't know each other at all. But since you're older than me, I can understand if you doubt my medical skills. However, you're crossing the line by misunderstanding me like that. Daniel did not expect Roxanne to be so aggressive. Even though he wanted to rebuke her, he decided against it and remained silent. Regarding the concerns you raised earlier, I can tell you very clearly that I won't be a burden to anyone. If I display a single unprofessional act, you can raise it up with me anytime. I'll leave on my own. The medical consultations target children. I won't joke around with children's lives. Roxanne stood in front of Daniel with a serious expression. Daniel's agitation dissipated slightly. He sounded quite hesitant when he said, "Since you've already said that, if anything wrong happens later." Before he could finish his sentence, Larry's gentle voice sounded in the cubicle. "If anything goes wrong, I'll settle it for her. You just need to mind yourself, Dr. Hop." When Daniel heard Larry's words, he completely lost all anger. Although he kept quiet timidly, he still could not help but look down on Roxanne. He was one of the top doctors in Chenia's traditional medicine scene. Other than those from a few prestigious families, any other traditional medicine doctor would treat him with the utmost respect. He also knew the other famous traditional medicine doctors in Chania. However, he had no idea who Roxanne was. It was evident that she was no one spectacular. If she didn't have Mr. Morrison and Mr. Damaris backing her up, she wouldn't have dared to speak to me like that. Looking at how Daniel had relented, Larry turned back and nodded at Roxanne to reassure her. Roxanne said gratefully, "Thank you, Larry. Don't worry, I'm doing great now." Initially, she was quite nervous. However, due to Daniel's provocation, her anxiety had now been replaced with fury. All she wanted to do was to prove herself to Daniel and erase his prejudice toward her. Larry heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that she was not affected. On the other hand, Jack stared at them with a thoughtful look. After meeting Larry in the office earlier, he already knew that they were acquainted. However, he did not expect them to be so close. A temporary silence befell the cubicle. Then, a commotion sounded from the door before a staff reminded Mr. Damaris, "The medical consultation has begun. The children are here." When they heard that, they immediately went into work mode. They changed their expressions and looked at the cubicle door with a smile. 4 adorable children entered in a line. When they saw the 4 adults in the room, they could not help but blush. Although Daniel was a middle-aged man with a beer belly, the other 3 were exceptionally good-looking. Despite the amiable smiles on the adults' faces, the kids felt shy. They stood at the entrance and hesitated to enter. Jack was quite experienced with these sorts of situations. Just when he was about to go forward to bring them in, Roxanne had already gone over. Hello." Smiling, Roxanne squatted in front of the kids and stroked their heads affectionately. When she approached them, the kids became even shyer. Blushing, they tried to retreat. However, Roxanne produced some sweets out of nowhere, placed them in her palm, and showed them to the kids. She said gently, "This sweet is delicious. Would you like to try it?" The kids had no immunity to sweets. They stared at Roxanne's palm eagerly. However, still smiling, she withdrew her hand. She stood up and extended an empty hand to a girl. "Come here. After I give you a checkup, I'll let you eat some sweets." The girl stared at her timidly, thinking that Roxanne was not only pretty but also smelled fragrant. Gazing at her with a smile, Roxanne looked like she was shining brightly. When Roxanne noticed the look on the child's face, she could not help but remember how Estella was similarly scared when they first met. Upon that thought, the look on Roxanne's face became gentler as she looked at the kid patiently. After a while, the girl extended her hand carefully and grabbed one of Roxanne's fingers. Heaving a sigh of relief, Roxanne brought the kid over to a bed and told her to lie on. The remaining 3 kids subconsciously wanted to follow her there. However, when the 3 men blocked the way, they cowered nervously. Roxanne turned her head around and glanced at them. Shaking her head exasperatedly, she told them, "You don't have to get a checkup from me specifically. If you let them give you a checkup, I'll still give you sweets." When the kids heard that, they hesitated for a while before lying on the other 3 beds. Roxanne was able to convince the other kids too. She managed to coax them to lie on the bed so she could give them a checkup. Most of the kids were very healthy. After taking Roxanne's sweets, they left happily. The remaining kids were those who had congenital diseases. Hiding in a corner, they cried timidly. When the doctors wanted to give them another checkup, they shrank back and refused to cooperate. Since they had been abandoned as a young child, they did not even dare to cry out loud and merely sobbed quietly. For a moment, the atmosphere in the cubicle became very tense. Roxanne's heart ached as she stared at the kids. Although she could not bear to continue, she suppressed it and consoled them, "Don't cry. You are all very brave, aren't you? You are just feeling a bit uncomfortable. It's no big deal. We're here to help you solve this problem. If you're obedient, you'll recover in no time." Knowing that they were ill, the kids were extremely terrified. They could not hear Roxanne's consolations and continued crying. Roxanne's heart ached terribly. She could not help but stroke one of the kids' faces. "Don't be scared. I'm here with you. You'll all recover and grow up healthily." As she spoke, she could not help but remember her own child who died prematurely and Estella, who also had a mental illness. She stared at the kids in front of her, her eyes reddening. When the kids noticed her eyes turning red, they knew that it was because of them. Their sobs became softer. Looking at how careful the kids were, Roxanne did not know what to say. She was afraid that if she spoke, she would sound like she was crying. Larry and Jack were standing behind her. When they saw her coaxing the children patiently, they fell silent at the same time. Naturally, their heart ached for the children too. However, as they did not know how to console the children, all they could do was stare at them. Although it was not Jack's first time witnessing this scene, he had never felt so touched before. On the other hand, Daniel could not stand it anymore. If he continued letting Roxanne console them like that, he did not know how long more he would have to wait. He rushed forward and grabbed a child's wrist impatiently. "Come here and let me give you a checkup. Only then will you recover." The child widened his eyes out of shock and fear. Daniel frowned. Thinking that it might work if he threatened the kid, he stared at the kid with a grim look. "If you don't listen to us, we won't care about you anymore." Seeing how fierce Daniel was, the child burst into tears, wailing out of fear. When Roxanne witnessed that, she quickly stood up to clear the tension. "Dr. Hop, they're still kids. They are scared easily, so please be more patient with them." Larry and Jack walked over with a frown too. "I'll let Dr. Jarvis do it." "The kids trust her more," said Jack. In the past, they would resort to a similar method whenever they encountered such a situation. However, things were different today. One of the kids could not be provoked as he would react aggressively. Just when they were worried that the kid would be scared, a commotion broke out in the corner. Jamie! Jamie, one of the kids ran over anxiously and tugged Roxanne's shirt. She quickly dashed over to take a look. When she arrived, she saw a boy curled up into a ball on the ground. His cheeks were deathly pale as tears streaked down his cheeks. Furthermore, his face was twisted in agony. Upon seeing that, the 4 adults in the room felt their hearts sinking. As for Daniel, he was so shocked that he hurriedly let go of the little one he was holding before rushing forward. The child on the ground had clearly been startled by his earlier action, and that caused the boy to be struck with a violent seizure. According to their diagnosis, the child had a strange condition where startling him would cause a vigorous chain reaction that would put him in great pain. It was their first time encountering such a case. Daniel had merely been trying to change a method to speed up the medical consultation's progress. He never expected he would startle the boy. Seeing how the pain was torturing the little child, the expressions of the four adults became grim. Roxanne was the first among them to react. She forcefully suppressed the panic in her as she got up and dispersed the children around Jamie. "Please don't be afraid. We will now help Jamie to get better. In the meantime, why don't you all head outside first?" The kids, however, surrounded Jamie as they refused to leave. One of the little girls then said with a voice choked with sobs, Jamie. Jamie would act like this sometimes, but he would recover by himself after a while. We'll wait here until he gets better." Hearing this, Roxanne felt a stinging pain in her heart. I wonder how little Jamie endured this horrifying pain back then all by himself. The rest of the kids showed great determination about staying back with Jamie, leaving Roxanne with no choice but to turn around to seek help from Larry. Instantly understanding her intention, Larry carefully lifted the boy from the ground before putting him on the bed. At this point, the little boy was already in so much pain that he was almost unconscious. A moment ago, the pain had him curled up in a fetal position, yet at this second, he couldn't even clench his hands anymore as he lay there limply with his face facing upward. Unfortunately, there was nothing the four of them could do. All they could do was watch. This was because they had yet to properly study the little boy's condition, but now was not the time to hesitate. There was even cold sweat all over Daniel's forehead now. After all, his reckless action was the sole reason that put the boy in this situation. If anything horrible happened to the little boy, his reputation would be destroyed in an instant. Upon this thought, Daniel wiped off the sweat on his forehead and gritted his teeth as he approached the bed, checking on the little boy's pulse. Before anyone was able to react, Daniel had already retrieved his acupuncture tools from the side and started sanitizing them. Seeing this, worry shrouded Roxanne, leading her to ask, "Dr. Hop, do you know how to treat the little one?" Her question had the already impatient Daniel becoming even more irritated as soon as he heard her voice. "It's not like I planned to frighten the little boy earlier. This all happened because of this woman. If she had not been so slow and wasted everyone's time, we wouldn't be in this situation now. Even if I don't, it's not like you would know." Daniel turned around and glanced at her unhappily before returning to sanitizing his tools. On the other hand, the sense of unease in Roxanne only deepened when she caught the irritation on his face. Standing right beside her were Larry and Jack. Just like Roxanne, both of them were also very skeptical about this, causing them to ask seriously, "So, according to your diagnosis, what is happening to the boy?" Daniel's expression froze up instantly for a split second upon being questioned, but he replied stiffly, "Regardless, whatever it is, we should stop the pain for him immediately. Can't you see that he's in so much pain?" With that said, he picked up the silver needles and prepared to give Jamie an acupuncture session. Larry and Jack did not voice any objections to Daniel's decision. After all, the little boy's pain was visibly horrifying, so helping him by stopping the pain first was entirely appropriate. They were too blinded by their worry for the boy that they forgot about the basics. On the other hand, Roxanne's heart tightened once more as soon as she saw the acupuncture point Daniel was aiming at. Out of instinct, she hurriedly stopped him. "Oh wait! Not on that acupuncture point." Her shouting immediately attracted the attention of the other three. Daniel became even more annoyed this time, and he said, "If you don't know what is going on, then you should stop kicking up a fuss, Dr. Jarvis. This is the most basic acupuncture point that is known for easing pain. Don't tell me you don't even know about this." Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.